The Ravens begin the season at 1-4 as doubt begins to settle in throughout the fan base.
Doubt has settled into the Ravens as they're looking to see how they can improve and get better.
And the season is beginning to slip away, and there needs to be a direction of where this team is going to go, and fast, with potential decisions on the horizon. Talk about that and so much more coming up on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show.
Rise and shine. It's the Ravens Squad. Everything Baltimore Ravens every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of Charm City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Flock together and squad up. The Ravens Squad Show starts now.
Welcome to a post-game edition of the Ravens Squad Show. My name is Sam Njoku, joined as always with Kevin Oestreicher and Kaji Ismail. The Ravens fall to the Houston Texans. The Ravens are 1-4. The sky is falling as the record continues to fall downward for the Ravens. They fall down the standings as well in the AFC North, which looked like a promising division to overtake for the third straight year. Doubt is settling in throughout the fan base, and as Q mentioned, in the locker room as well. Plenty to get to in this episode of the Ravens Squad Show. The Ravens are embarrassed by the Houston Texans. We'll touch on that. Is this the end of the John Harbaugh era? Which is a crazy thing to say here in week 5. And we're talking about whether or not the issues that the Ravens are actually having can be fixed. Of course, let it be known that this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. Kevin, you watched the show along with me and Q as well. Ravens, they found a way to irk the fan base big time with this shellacking. What did you take about this performance overall?
You try to find the good in every loss. I legitimately do not think I can in this one. Like, Zay Flowers had one big play. It was, Derrick Stingley fell down on that play. Nice adjustment from Zay. They score one touchdown. But, like, literally everything about this game was just awful. I mean, defensively, you can't stop anything. Offensively, the interceptions and the turnovers and the lack of movement. Coaching-wise, play calls, John Harbaugh getting out coached again. And I just want to say this off the bat here. The Ravens need to take the entire screen section of their offensive playbook and burn it. Just burn it. Throw it in the fireplace. You're done. Because we're seeing these, like, why are the Ravens calling a screen on, like, 3rd and 9? And the Texans are sniffing it out. And I get that you need to find more ways to be creative to get the ball in people's hands without Lamar. And, you're obviously depleted. But it's just like those types of play calls. And it was multiple screens. It just went absolutely nowhere. It felt like the Ravens, again, just didn't know when to run the ball and when not to run the ball. And again, like, the Texans were doing a really good job of stopping Derrick Henry anyway. But they were essentially tipping their plays because non-Ravens running backs or Ravens running backs not named Derrick Henry, I should say, just 4 total carries in this game compared to Henry's 16. And you would think, hey, all right, Keaton's up and, maybe you can get a nice dose of justice. But essentially it was, all right, Derrick Henry's on the field, run play. Oh, Justice Hill or Keaton Mitchell's on the field. Oh, they're going to pass the ball here. Like, you're tipping away your plays. And then defensively, and I saw you tweet this out, Sam, they play so soft on almost every play. It is ridiculous. And I get that this Ravens team does not want to get beat deep. They want to keep everything in front of them. That's their mindset. Bend, don't break. Keep everything in front. And when they get down to, like, the Ravens 30, 25-yard line, it's field goal. Man, the Ravens are just breaking every single time. The Ravens, by the way, stats here. I said this on the Watch Along and the Instant Reaction show. The Ravens, you have 2 games, week 4 and week 5, 20 total defensive possessions in each of those 2 games. The Ravens have had a punt forced, their defense forced a punt on just 2 of those 20 possessions. The Texans' offensive drives in this game, you look at how the Ravens defense fared right now, every single possession was essentially points. Touchdown, field goal, touchdown, 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 field goal, touchdown, field goal. They finally got the punt with like 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and then the end of the game. This team is lost right now. They need an identity. Everybody seems dejected. And look, the schedule opens up, but if you keep playing like this, especially against the Texans team, that like the offense was like 18th, 20th in the league in rushing and passing, They were the second worst red zone offense coming into this game. They go 4 or 5 in the red zone, of course. They're the second worst third down offense in the league. They go 7 to 12 on third down, of course. It's just like, hey, if you need a team, if a team you want to go and get yourself right, come on down to Baltimore and play this Baltimore Ravens team because they'll get you right. Because that's what this Ravens team has been so far for the majority of the season. And quite frankly, it's very disappointing.
Not only is it disappointing, I think it's one of those scenarios where you know the guys are going to turn on the film and watch just this drudgery of football. And I going in the locker room after the game, it just felt sobering. Like just the life was just sucked out of the entire room, and rightly so. To go against a Texans team that, as you said, offensively, they were the bottom of the barrel. Red zone offense was horrible. Fourth down offense was the only decent thing for them, but they probably were so desperate that teams were like, okay, we'll allow it. But you're right. Third down offense, they're 31st in the league in points per game. They weren't putting up any points at all. Rushing attack was middle to below the pack. And this defense, I thought would have had a great opportunity to kind of redeem itself, to right the ship, and it did not. And as you said, I mean, it was like as soon as they got on the field, I mean, I guess it was a little bit of a mercy that they started off the game with a touchdown drive that 10 play, 67 yards, another 10 play, 47 yard, and it was only a field goal, but they could not do anything. It was a butt whooping of butt whoopings, and the offense did nothing to slow it down either. I think offensively, as you were saying, Kevin, with the personnel packages and I wouldn't necessarily say predictability, because I think in Todd Monken's defense, what you're trying to do is put in the best plays for a specific player to run, to have a chance to succeed. And I think Keaton Mitchell, we know, is a home run threat, but your offensive line is not very good. So if your offensive line is not very good, what is the counter punch, if you will, to the defense and what they're going to do? Well, you try to get the defense moving, and you're hoping your offensive line is going to be able to hold up enough, but also to get Keaton out in space, to get Zay Flowers out in space. You know that your quarterback, if you can move him a little bit, and I think that, on the one play to Charlie Kolar, they had a misdirection, and he had a naked boot out the other way, and Charlie Kolar was able to get the reception. I saw the thinking of it, but ultimately, I think when it came down to trying to have sustained drives, trying to be that team that you're like, all right, well, this is it. This is where they right the ship. It was just mud in the water, and you just didn't see them. You didn't see the momentum that you thought you were going to see, no matter who was in there, no matter what personnel was in there. And it comes down to offensive line. If you have a good offensive line, you're going to be able to execute pretty much anything. I think that's something that, and it's not, Kevin, you don't know what you're talking about. No, you do know what you're talking about. I just think that bigger picture wise, you're handcuffed when your offensive line, it all starts there. Ask the Texans how it felt when they weren't rushing the football, and you had Nick Chubb had to be signed over, and that's great and all that. But when you're going 3 and out because the D is dictating to your offensive front, it doesn't matter. I think for today, we saw it in reverse, where the defensive front for the Texans, which has been stout, they dictated to the Ravens offensive line, and the defensive for the Ravens defensive front, they couldn't do anything. And we saw as you said, field goal, touchdown, 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 field goal, touchdown, field goal. Oh, I guess we'll punt. Oh, I guess now we'll just take a knee and end the game.
Yeah. And I agree with you, where like the offensive line was a huge problem. It has been a huge problem. I think my messaging was more like, we saw that the Ravens offensive line couldn't keep up and couldn't get out into space, and they kept going back to it, is I think kind of what my thing was.
Agreed. And that's where, not my pushback in the sense, but my pushback that this is all we got. Like there is
Yeah,
no
yeah.
plan B. That's where maybe perhaps, yeah, you and others and even myself are like, well, okay, well, you should have had a plan C. But I think if you look at like, all right, this is man, I think we can make this work. I know that this is what we practice. I know that this is what the defense is doing. We should be able to make this work. And it didn't. And that's the tough part about it.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised how much I underestimated how awful the offensive line was for the Ravens. Because I thought going into this game, okay, well, at least start running the football, and then if you have a monicum of success, you can go ahead and use the play action to give Cooper Rush a little bit of time in the pocket where it doesn't seem like the offensive line is crumbling every which way around him. But that wasn't the case. The defensive front of the Houston Texans were stout, and the loss of Lamar Jackson was felt, which is, I mean, we knew what Lamar Jackson meant to this team, but man, we didn't. I don't know if we knew exactly how much. At least the coaching staff felt like they didn't, because, boy, they came into this game and they got absolutely beat down. And speaking of getting beat down, I think this more so goes into the defense because, besides Dynamite BK being out, their defensive front was pretty much back kind of to its true form. Odafe always back, Convanoy's back. The middle of their defensive, Roquan Smith out is limping a little bit, as is the third level with Kyle Hamilton, but it's just though this defense is just not going to get their act together no matter what they do. Maybe the option is to get another voice in there opposite Zachary Orr, or maybe Zachary Orr is removed completely, but I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel with this defense. Whereas for the offense, Kevin, I think that once Lamar Jackson comes back, I think that we'll get a little bit more emotion going.
Yeah, I mean, and the offense wasn't the problem. I mean, in general, they were putting up points with Lamar out there, but I just think like this is who the Ravens are with Lamar. And you know what I kept saying on the instant reaction show, and even the watch along was like, look, if Lamar was playing in this game and the Ravens offense, okay, put up like 30 points or an easy 24, like something along those lines, you still got to strat that defense out on every single possession. And that defense is stopping nobody. And we've seen like week one, they wasted that Ravens offensive performance. And then, I know offensively it hasn't been perfect, but at least that offense is putting up points when Lamar is out there on the field. The problem is that this defense has given up 37 plus points in 4 of their first 5 games. They're on pace to be a historic record. And I know that, Sam, you and I joked about it, where Zach Orr was talking during his press conference this past week about how, man, I heard from someone in the locker room that like, tough times, like make you, or you can break records or something. And everyone's like, yeah, well, you're certainly breaking records right now, not in the way you want to, but you're certainly on pace to break some records this season. And that's where the Ravens are right now. I think that, I saw, I can't remember where I saw the stat. I'll try to find it quickly, but like this Ravens team is just on historic levels of bad right now defensively. And you're right. Like, where is the light at the end of the tunnel? Because even with Namdi, like even you go as far back as like, hey, Namdi goes out there for the first 2 weeks and all of a sudden you're still not playing well. Your pass rush still isn't great. And we talked about it. The 3 of us talked about it. Like this Texans offensive line is horrible. Like they are horrible. In my opinion, the worst offensive line in the league. And the Ravens only were able to get 2 sacks. One of which I see the face cue. You might be putting the Ravens up there. I see you with that.
I'm like, hey, going into the game, you might have had a point, but coming out of the game, I think it's time to change that over.
Man, but even still, you get a free rush by Kyle Van Noy, right place, right time, really good play by KVN to get that sack, and then Mr. Trenton Simpson, everybody's favorite Raven, comes across and makes a play. On a play where Tavius actually got the first pressure. CJ kind of evades that, gets outside. But again, like 2 sacks, and just felt like CJ had all day to kind of sit back there, go through reads. We saw plays where it was play action and, whether it was Simpson or Keon Martin or someone else leaving a guy to come pressure CJ. And then, CJ just floats it up over the defender's head. And whether it was Dalton Schultz or Nico Collins, we saw them find soft spots. We talked about the conversions. It's just like everything that could go wrong for them right now is going wrong. And I see it's a stat here from PFSN. They actually tagged me in this, saying that the Ravens have given up, again, 35 plus points in 4 of their first 5 games. That's already the most games allowing 35 or more points in a season in Ravens franchise history. We are 5 games into the year. So a lot of bad, a lot of records, and not in a good way right now.
Interesting, because as I'm kind of just looking over the stats and everything, like it as much as I'm looking at Teddy Buchanan and what he did, he had a combined 12 tackles. Trenton Simpson had 9. Malaki Starks had 7. Nate Wiggins had 5. Those guys, phew, Martin had 4. You got to go all the way down to Brent Urban before you get to a real quote-unquote veteran guy for this Ravens team. There's a lot of young players that I don't really feel they know how to play strong and play that typical play like a Raven. I think it's just, guys out there. And oh yeah, we're making a tackle. That's it. I don't really see the consistency. I don't see the effort. I don't know. You can bring in, a new coach. I'm a huge fan of Zach Orr, but it wouldn't surprise me though that at some point in time, maybe even the bye week, they either move on from him or they figure out like some sort of change from a personnel aspect of things too. I think John Harbaugh has done this before where he's felt like we need to make changes, and obviously they've made changes before. Tech going all the way back to Cam Cameron, and they won the Super Bowl with that change. I right now I'm like, boy, you're going to need something. They are this Ravens offense, the Ravens defense, the coaching staff. There's just no answers. They have no answers.
That is tough. It is a tough sight to behold for Ravens fans who thought that this would be the year that they go to the championship. Still a lot of games left to be played, but man, based on what we've seen over the first 4 or 5 games of the season, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that championship is the least of our worries here entering into week 6 against the stout Los Angeles Rams. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll touch on what this loss means for the Harbaugh era in Baltimore, what it means for the players currently on this roster, a lot more to get to here on the Ravens Squad Show. This episode is brought to you by Square, your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that make that neighborhood the neighborhood. These are the places that become an extension of home, whether it's a sports bar dedicated to your team's fan base, the spot with the best wings in town for game day, or that beloved local chain that's been rooted in your community for years. These businesses are what bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. There's a spot over at Fed Hill called Be More Licks. Been a heart of that community for years. That's where I go to when the Ravens lose. Good ice cream, good places to meet up with other Ravens fans to talk about how the Ravens may have won or fell short. Take this as an excuse to go to support your favorite local spot and have yourself a day in the neighborhood. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/LockedOnNFL to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square. See you in the neighborhood. All right, folks, we're back here with another edition of the Ravens Squad Show. Unfortunately, after a huge loss to the Houston Texans, plenty to get to, but just want to remind you that this show is going to be available for you twice a week, once after every Ravens game and once on Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Myself, Kevin, Q, we're here talking Ravens football all day, and hopefully better times ahead, but we'll see. The Ravens certainly aren't making it any easier for us as the Ravens do, in fact, suffer another huge loss, this time without Lamar Jackson, so the excuses there. But still, this is another big-time loss with John Harbaugh leading the charge. Lots of fan bases are, deal with a lot less and get rid of their head coaches. The Ravens, after almost 18 years, have steadfast with John Harbaugh through thick and thin. This might be a different situation. It feels like times are changing here right before our eyes even. Q, not only were you at the press conference, you were in the locker room. What is the feel of the locker room? Because you mentioned it at the start of the show that, the mood is shifting over there for a lot of big-time players. What are your assessment of this roster heading into week 6 as far as how they're feeling about this loss?
The interesting thing, I think we as a fan base, us content providers for the fan base, we can always count on just number one, the expectation of excellence. And what does that mean? Like, you see a competitive football game, you see a competitive back and forth with both offensive side of the ball, defensive side of the ball. Heck, you see some level of something special go on, special teams. And what we're seeing, especially today, but defensively throughout this early portion of the season, is just like this apathetic way of playing. And it's so bizarre. I think that's something that, when I walked in the locker room, I was like, man, like these guys just seem like, either it's like they feel like, hey, it ain't me, or they're feeling something as far as it's that guy and that guy ain't doing his job or pulling his weight. But I don't know if the problems can be fixed. That's what is so troubling. Like, it's just I keep saying the word bizarre because it's mind-boggling to me. But the energy in the locker room, certainly, I don't think those guys know what exactly what it is that they need to do. They say the cliche thing, we got to play better. We got to play better. Well, yeah, but how does it start? Where does it start? Who does it start with? Where are the leaders that will get it accomplished?
Yeah, it's a big problem because, as I've kind of said and been pretty consistent saying, like, you're not going to win games if you have this vibe around your team. And with each loss, it just feels like we sink deeper and deeper into, whatever that hole is. And they really need to figure it out because it just feels like the messaging has grown stale. I mean, it feels like it's that way. And you have a lot of other opportunities if you're the Ravens this season to right the ship, but you've put yourself in a situation where, you essentially need to get it right and you can't lose a lot of games. And the problem is that we know the Ravens are probably good for a bad performance or two against a team they probably should beat. They have one of those or two of those every year. So you got to factor that in. You got almost all your AFC North games coming up, and it doesn't matter how bad or good those teams are. Every single time there's going to be a crazy, wild AFC North game that happens. You just got to factor that in. So there are so many different things that the Ravens have to deal with right now, but you can't get through it without everybody buying in. And it feels like right now people are not bought in. I don't know how deep that goes. I'm not in that locker room. I don't know the ins and outs, but just judging from what you said, Q, and kind of the mood and even just on the field in front of the public eye, like everybody's seeing it on the broadcast, or if you're at the stadium, it's like guys are dejected. Every single camera cut seems to be to an injured Ravens player or a dejected Ravens player. It's just like every single cut. And, guys aren't having fun, and nor should they be. It's been a rough season, but part of what makes this Ravens team unstoppable when they are unstoppable, it feels like they just kind of like ride off the vibes. And when those vibes aren't going in their favor, it seems like everything comes crashing down pretty quickly.
Wasn't a half hour ago.
Yeah, I just feel like
I think one thing
finger point.
Yep,
Oh, go ahead.
No. I just think that one thing that when he says, when Kevin, you mentioned how from a locker room aspect of things, like leadership, like I'm like, that's what you just always knew from a Ravens aspect of it all. And it's like, where's the leadership? I think that's what is really mind-boggling to me, the bad play and lack of leadership within the locker room.
Yeah, I was going to say that it just feels like there's like finger pointing without necessarily finger pointing. They're doing a good job of saying, hey, well, it's somebody not getting the job done. The fundamentals, this and that, but nobody's really, finger pointing in public. But it seems like that's going down in the locker room and in the roster for sure. What are your thoughts about, Q, I'll come back to you. What are your thoughts about John Harbaugh having to be that leader? Because Lamar Jackson's kind of that leader on the football field, but it doesn't seem as though there is any leadership, emanating from the head coach, but it probably should be.
Well, certainly everything goes through John Harbaugh. His leadership, or how he needs to look at what the issues are and how to correct it, the personnel. I look at both him and Eric DaCosta, because from an Eric aspect of things, you got these mounting injuries, okay, and you got some poor play, okay. Who are you bringing in you didn't bring in anybody, as far as this week was concerned, and I don't know what it looks like as far as moving forward. From a John Harbaugh perspective, what is it that you're doing or not doing to figure out what the coaches need to see better, figure out what messaging needs to be made even more clearer. I think, just practicing harder is not the case because we already know that they, run a extremely difficult practice to begin with. So, that's where, again, the heartbeat of the team, what is it that you need to do to make this thing happen?
Yeah, it's in my opinion, there's just so much that you need right now for the Ravens, and part of it is just you need a voice. You need a voice to come in there, be a uniter, and tell everybody like, hey, this is how we're doing this. We're gonna right this ship. Just give the team a sense of direction because it truly feels like it's I said this before. It's like a rudderless team right now in the middle of nowhere. Like they're just kind of floating out in the middle of the ocean, and there's no land that you can see. It's all just ocean, and there's no end in sight there. So, I mean, I think you need a voice, and whether that, I mean, ideally it'd be your head coach or somebody on that coaching staff. But if it even is just a player, like player leadership is extremely important too. Like, and I know you were on teams, in that 2000s team. I mean, that defense and everybody on that unit, and yourself and everybody. Whether it be one player taking that role or whether it's multiple guys, everybody has a little role as a leader to fill. And even when you talk about that Ravens team in 2012, where they went through a lot that season too. And, you saw some of those leaders and players in the locker room kind of say, hey, this is how we're going to do things. And we're going to make this happen our way. And, I think John Harbaugh is still kind of trying to figure out how to be a coach in the NFL at that point, and kind of, first couple of years of him after having a lot of playoff success. But that year was tough in a lot of different ways. And then, you saw players say, hey, we're going to try to do this a different way. And clearly that and a lot of other stuff propelled them to a Super Bowl win. But when everybody's feeling down, everybody's dejected, the messaging is almost kind of like finger pointing or the blame game, or like, I don't know how I feel about this, or the messaging, I don't really know. Like all those vibes just become, it's just poor. And you can talk about play on the field and execution and play calls and whatnot, but if you're not going out there believing every single Sunday or every single game day you can win, or that you have a chance, and something goes wrong and all of a sudden it's like, oh, here we go again, that's when your season's done, because you can't win anything like that.
2012, it was interesting. I remember two guys. The one guy was Jamil McClain, and it was after, I think, the Giants game, I believe. Eli Manning and them came in to M&T and really took it to this Ravens squad, if my memory serves me correct. But I just remember the next week, and I'm, in the locker room, and he was like, hey, man, I'm going to tell you right now, like that Giants game was bad, but watch us. We are close, and we're going to do it. Of course, they went on a run, and the rest was history. When it came to the other guy, it was Art Jones, rest in peace. And Art, he said, man, I need to play better. I was walking down the hallway. He was walking the opposite direction. He goes, yeah, what's going on, bro? I was like, hey, man, how you doing, man? What do you feel as far as your year? I was like, you started making some more plays, I see. And he goes, yeah, I just had a quick, encouraging talk from Ed Reed. And I was like, well, what did he say? He goes, we were watching film. He goes, hey, man, you need to play better. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. And I just thought about it. I was like, wow, this is Ed Reed looking at me and, examining my play. And I just knew I needed to play better. And it was as simple as that. I was like, wow. So from a leadership standpoint, but attitude standpoint, and just overall feeling, I don't see that in this Ravens locker room current day.
And that is a real shame. Rest in peace to Art Jones, actually. Passed away earlier this week. But Yeah, the Ravens it just feels like they're lacking leadership. You see Roquan Smith out there. Yeah. Kyle Hamilton seems like he's trying to step up and be a leader. Marlon Humphrey tried to take that approach, but I'm not sure if he's got the personality for it. But man, the Ravens could certainly use some leadership right now because they are suffering. I mean, if you were watching at home, you saw the Cams focus on the sidelines. Besides maybe Zay Flowers and maybe a couple others, not a lot of guys seem to really be caring about it or didn't show that emotion. Not sure if that's what's being portrayed in the facility, but definitely tell that something's going on, and it probably starts with the head coach. When we get back, we'll take a quick break. When we get back, we'll talk about Lamar Jackson and where he fits in with all this because he is going to return. What is he going to return to and how it may affect him not only this year but moving forward? We'll talk to the next here on the Ravens Squad Show. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, they move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week moment that moved the game forward will likely be Zay Flowers having a big-time catch in the third quarter of down 34-3, 56-yard completion. He set the game moving forward, let the team know that they were not out of the woods yet. Unfortunately, they will lose that game. But, of course, Zay Flowers is doing all he can to push his team forward. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, we are back here. Another edition of the Ravens Squad Show. Unfortunately, the Ravens do lose to the Houston Texans big time on lots of negative comments from the fans, from us. It's just unfortunate, but that doesn't mean we stop rolling. We play every single week, twice a week actually. Post-game show, Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. KO has the Locked On Ravens podcast every single day, including the weekends. He is continuing to truck along Ravens news, so don't fret. If it's the weekend and you want some Ravens news, log on to the Locked On Ravens podcast. You sure will get it. Unfortunately, the Ravens do lose to the Houston Texans. Lots of unfortunate, speak about where this team goes from here. And none greater, I believe, than Lamar Jackson, who's currently dealing with a hamstring injury. He's going to return eventually. And the question becomes, what team is he going to return to? Will this be a 1-5 team? Will he probably take a step back regarding whether or not he wants to continue to play with the hamstring? Because I don't know if 2 weeks is enough. Q, I actually start with you on that. Do you think the 2 to 3 week time frame is enough for him to be fully healed 100%? Or will he be dealing with that hamstring injury for the remainder of the season?
I think it's a scenario where you could see him getting back, and let's realize there's no 100%. There is no 100% once the season starts. Everyone deals with something, and this is something that he has to deal with. I think it won't necessarily affect his game once he gets back. It's just that the overly aggressive explosiveness that we've been accustomed to seeing might not fully be there. So there's levels to injuries, but make no mistake about it, like the Ravens need him back sooner rather than later. If you're going to salvage the season, again, the AFC North is all right in front of you. You have, whether it be the Bengals, the Steelers, obviously you got to play another Cleveland game, and like Dylan Gabriel's playing. I mean, goodness gracious, he might be giving the Ravens a go at it. But I think overall that, yeah, let's not sit back and think Lamar Jackson should sit out the rest of the season, or, oh, wow, we want him to be 100+%. No, you need him now, and you cannot afford to have him miss any more games. Obviously, it might be a scenario where he's going to miss this Rams game, which makes it even tougher. But, yeah, you cannot afford to have him miss. Once this bye week is up, he needs to be back.
Yeah, the bye week 100% after the bye. I mean, again, I don't think Lamar will play in this game. That's kind of been the messaging. And, I wouldn't want to rush him back. It's, again, like you're in a pretty dire spot, and you kind of wonder, like, hey, is the team going to try to make this thing go as quick as possible and try to get him back on the field? But I wouldn't do that. Like, again, yeah, I agree with you. There's nothing about shutting him down for the season, nothing about any of that. It's just going to be a matter of probably coming back after the bye to a potentially 1-5 football team, which, at that rate, you kind of have to win almost every one of your remaining games. The worst record that got into the playoffs last year was 10-7. And while, you still have your AFC North games, at least the majority of them, still have a couple of other games against interesting teams. I mean, the Packers is going to be a really tough game for them, depending on what version of the Vikings they get. Maybe the Vikings will be a tough game, but, at the end of the day, like, they just need Lamar to get to as close to 100%, because Q's right. There's no 100%. So as close to 100% is possible before you get back out there on that field, because it does nothing for anybody if, Lamar is out there and he's at 75%, clearly not himself, because that obviously increases the risk for injury most likely, as well as the fact that he's not able to go out there and do what Lamar Jackson can do. So I would probably assume there's one more week of Cooper Rush, but I'd probably say after the bye week he's back. And again, I have no knowledge of whether that's going to be the case or not, but that's probably the timeline where I feel like that's most likely.
I think Cooper Rush played good. Go ahead, Q. Sorry.
No, I'm just trying to, be glass half full. Cooper Rush didn't play bad, but he didn't play good.
Yeah.
He had an interception on a flat route. Ball pops up in the air with Mark Andrews and it's picked. Rashad Bateman, he's sprinting down the field. He kind of feels like he needs to decelerate. Ball gets picked. I just think that bigger picture wise, you knew you needed to have him play his best, but you also knew that you needed to, as a team, like all of y'all, step up and help. And it wasn't there. That's the frustrating thing about it. And you add on to the fact that you had an offensive line that continues to be an enigma and just not playing the way they need to play.
100%. That is correct. I think that let's take a look at the crystal ball here, and let's speculate for a little bit. Let's say the Ravens do in fact miss the playoffs, they don't get in, or they make the playoffs and they fall short of the Super Bowl. Now we're looking at Lamar Jackson as this guy who is capable, of course, of winning the championship, but can't get it done with the Ravens, at least up to this point. His contract is going to be a huge cap hit this upcoming season, $74.5 million or something to that effect, where the Ravens are going to have to get some adjustment on the part of Lamar in order to fit guys into the cap or make some very tough decisions outside of Lamar Jackson. If you're Lamar Jackson, what is your approach to this season, especially with, we're assuming that John Harbaugh is still the head coach at the end of the season. I don't think he's going to get fired mid-season. Could you see him make demands similar to what he did when they brought in Odell Beckham? That was a large part because Lamar requested that guy. Could you see Lamar Jackson, Kevin, making demands where, okay, well, I have to, if I'm going to move forward with the team this upcoming season, we need to make a change at head coach. We need to make some changes at the offensive line. I need weapons that I can absolutely count on, even though, in my opinion, the weapons are decent to just fine or even, above average as opposed to the rest of the league. But let's just say Lamar Jackson wants to make changes. He doesn't see the light in the horizon, as you mentioned, for the defense. He wants to put all of efforts into the offense. Could you see the Ravens catering to those demands, or could we be looking at a very tumultuous offseason for Lamar Jackson? No, it's just week 5, but let's just play that crystal ball game.
No, I mean, it's important to talk about for sure. I mean, I think that Lamar has all the leverage here for multiple reasons. One, you saw the product on the field today. It's not necessarily like Cooper played terrible football, but this is just who the Ravens are without Lamar Jackson. They're not a very good football team. And, if I'm Lamar Jackson, I'm looking there and I'm saying, you need me. Like you do not have a team without me. So either you're going to listen to what I have to say. And I think that they do that anyway. Like, I don't think that they just tune out Lamar. I mean, clearly you're right. Like Odell and D-Hop and all that. And they listened. Like, they eventually got both those guys in. So I don't think that it's not a collaborative effort, but I'm talking honestly more contractually, where Lamar has a $70+ million cap hit next season. And Lamar could sit there and say, hey, if you want me to redo this deal, you're going to have to give me a lot more than I originally thought I was going to get, because you see what the team is right now. And now, again, would Lamar do that? I'm not sure. Like, I genuinely do not know, because we know from a team building perspective, if Lamar went out there and said, hey, give me $80 million a year or something crazy along those lines, or 75 or 70 or whatever, obviously that would hurt you from a team building perspective. And so maybe Lamar says, hey, I'll lighten that up a little bit so that there'll be enough room to make some moves and all that. But I don't know. Again, like, Lamar deserves his money. You should go out there and get his money. And it was a great move by him to kind of structure his contract this way, because it forces the Ravens to come back to the table after just a handful of years instead of having to play out that full duration. And honestly, it secures Lamar more money, especially after what we saw Josh Allen get. But I mean, look, the offensive line, they need to invest more resources, especially into the guard position. I mean, there's going to be a question mark Linderbaum in the offseason. Does he come back? Does he not? But we know that, and we all three of us talked about this, whether it was us on the squad show or, Sam, you and I individually, Q, you and I individually. It's like, this roster on paper is unbelievable. Like, fully healthy, everything that's going on. It's an unbelievable roster. It's honestly a once in a very long time, almost lifetime type roster when you talk about everybody that's in there. Not that they didn't have holes in the first place. We talked about the guard position and some of the other stuff as well, but you're going to have a lot of losses this offseason, which probably include Mark Andrews, probably include an FAOA, probably include Jaire Alexander. And again, certain guys that I just listed are playing better than others right now. So I know the conversation is how big of a loss are those types of guys, but again, you're replacing them with what? An unproven rookie or somebody else. I mean, you're gonna have to sign guys to extensions, and it's just a very odd situation right now because you don't know who's staying and who's going. You thought you had this window right here where every time, whenever you have Lamar Jackson, whenever he's on your roster, you have a chance to win. It just is what it is. But you do have to kind of start wondering, is Lamar going to go to the front office and say, hey, you need to do this, or else, I don't know. Is Lamar requesting trades or leaving or what? I don't know the situations, but if this goes the way that it will, I mean, I first of all don't think that Harbaugh would be the head coach after this season if the Ravens continue to play this way. I agree, Sam. I don't think that they would necessarily fire him during the season. I just don't think that's who the Ravens are. But maybe Lamar sticks around and says, hey, let me have big input on who this next head coach is going to be. I want to be involved in that decision and be involved in it a lot. I'm sure the Ravens wouldn't deny him that opportunity. So maybe that's kind of the thing here, where if the Ravens have a disappointing season, John Harbaugh gets fired and Lamar kind of gets to give his 2 cents, or maybe more than 2 cents, into who that next head coach could be.
I think if anything, if he wants to push I want to sign an extension, obviously we need to be whatever salary cap friendly and all the things. I believe he's going to be like, yo, I want an offensive line that's going to block, because he's got everything. He's got the receivers. He's got the tight ends. He's got the running back. He's got everything. He just has a poor offensive line. They've rolled the dice Moneyball-wise on the 2 guards, and you're seeing a regression in Roger Rosengard. Boy, I think the injury-wise to Ronnie Stanley is something that needs to be looked at. But, I think ultimately it's one of those scenarios where, he is in a situation where without a good offensive line, it doesn't matter how good your skills guys are or how good you are. I'm sure part of it is if he had an offensive line that was formidable, you're not sitting there worrying about your hamstring, because you can sit in the pocket and pick people off. He has that skill. He's one of the best ever sitting in the pocket. His record clearly shows it, but his element to his running game and the running game period has to do with a better offensive line.
It is a sad truth, but you're absolutely right. Both of you guys hit the nail right on the head. So kudos to you guys. Yeah, there's going to be an offseason for sure. And maybe not, some of these issues that the Ravens have may be able to get fixed prior to the start of next season. We're going to talk about that. Can the Ravens issues be fixed, or is it too late for this Ravens team to make those adjustments necessary to compete for a playoff spot, let alone a championship? So we'll talk about that coming up next in this next segment here on the Ravens Squad Show. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right, pick a bet, Put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays, tried player props, and even followed the live lines during games. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Welcome back, Ravens flock, to the Ravens Squad Show. Again, we're available twice a week, once on after every game day and once on Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Join myself, KO, Q, as we dive into the Ravens news, especially considering the Ravens have a lot to talk about, or a lot to get to before they can actually compete for, hopefully, a playoff spot in the championship. You can also find us wherever you get your podcast, and make sure you give us 5 stars, leave a comment. Tell a friend who's a Ravens fan who doesn't know about the show. It'll really help this show out as we get across to the Ravens Nation, Ravens flock, that we are here to stay and give you that Ravens news that you so desperately need. Another segment here on the Ravens Squad Show. Ravens fall to the Houston Texans, but that doesn't mean there aren't areas that are fixable for this team. Kevin, I will start with you on this because some of this stuff, I mean, again, you talked about it. This roster came in, we talked about this being one of the best rosters we've ever seen. Not only from a Ravens team, but period in the NFL put together. These guys are still here. Besides Nnamdi Madubuike, everyone else here was capable of coming back and trying to fight for an improved defense or improved offense. What are your thoughts about this team overall as far as what they need to do to get things together? Is this a situation where we expect EDC to get on the phone and trade in somebody that can compete for somebody who you believe is totally inept at playing position, whatever that position is? Or do you think it's just about getting this team together, getting the coaches together, and figuring this out?
It's probably both. I mean, I think you do need some semblance of a pass rush here. I mean, I'm not necessarily sure where you go in terms of that. I mean, it would have to be a big addition. Like, I think Dexter Lawrence, Quinnen Williams, Jeffrey Simmons, but we know that that's not the Ravens' MO. Like, that's not what they like to do. They like to keep their draft picks. And, when you have a quarterback on a big contract like Lamar Jackson, I mean, you kind of have to operate that way, but it just feels like, a lot of people, and honestly, I kind of feel this way too. It's like, I don't really care about compensatory picks at this point anymore. Like, you've been there, you've done that. Some of them work, some of them don't. Like, I think you really have to try to maximize this window and not necessarily, like, again, like the Ravens have been uber competitive over the course of their franchise history because of the fact that, they try to get every little win in a trade or every little advantage they can. But I just think sometimes you might just have to lose a trade long-term to get the immediate short-term value from it. I think that's kind of where the Ravens are right now. Is one player going to fix this defense? No. I mean, you have to get everybody else on the same page, and it's kind of the stuff he has to be talked about with the coaching staff and everybody else of leadership. But again, Nnamdi Madubuike is done for the season. You're not going to get him back this year. So the guys on the field that are available clearly have not shown that they can take that step and make an impact. And I think if you're able to make a move for a guy like one of the 3 I mentioned, and people are talking about Kayvon Thibodeau or some of those other guys, like maybe that is what they have to do, because even if Lamar comes back and everybody gets healthy, again, they weren't playing good enough when they were healthy in the first place. So that's something you got to monitor for sure.
Defensive end, defensive tackle, defensive end, defensive tackle, trade something, do something, guard, offensive line, guard, defensive tackle, trade, do something.
Wow.
The discussion. The end.
I agree.
We are at DEFCON 4 and about to look at the abyss of this being a non-relevant season in the Lamar Jackson era, and that is troubling to all Raven fans. And if it isn't to John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta, then it definitely needs to be troubling to Steve Bisciotti.
Yeah, I agree. I think Eric DeCosta has a lot of work to do. I don't know what happens. I don't know where they go. Again, as you guys mentioned, it's the middle of the season. Maybe Dexter Lawrence, the Giants, I think they did lose to the Saints. So I don't know how much they want to take away from Jackson Dart as he gets ready to ramp up his playing time. But the Ravens got to do something. And maybe that means trading the first round pick, something they don't like to do at all. I think after the Ravens traded their first round pick for Kyle Boller, they've been very hesitant to get rid of that first round pick. At least that's what I've been hearing throughout the years. But now is the time to do something because the Ravens are out of their depth. And even if the Ravens make that trade for a defensive end or a defensive tackle, again, we talked about it at the beginning of the show. I mean, the way their philosophy is, the bend don't break, the keeping corners 5, 6, 7, 10 yards away from the receiver and giving, the opposing quarterback time to attack them with digs or slants or whatever. That's not gonna cut it no matter what you do on the defensive end. Kevin, I'll start with you. Does Zach Orr need to go? Does it need to be a change philosophy-wise? Do you see someone on the coaching staff, maybe a Chuck Pagano, maybe they bring back Dean Pease for another go, come back, Wink Martindale, something to get this team going on defense because it feels like, especially on the defensive side of the ball, they're completely lost.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer, in my opinion, is yes. I think at this point, we've seen it through 5 weeks, and we've seen it, honestly, through the course of past year and some change where Zach Orr started way too slow for the Ravens last year as well. And, kind of took a bunch of sweeping changes and, Dean Pease coming in to help him out. And, now it's kind of the same story, but like 10 times worse this time around. And, do I think Zach Orr has potential as a coordinator? Yeah, 100% I do. But the Ravens don't have the time to wait right now. They just don't have the time to wait for him to develop into the coordinator that he could be. They need someone who's more experienced, someone who is more ready for the moment. And clearly Zach Orr is not. And, the players' messaging has been that, hey, he's not going out there and making tackles for us or, dropping interceptions or giving up points. But, it is his calls that are widely contributing, whether it be playing too often coverage or sending pressures at weird times or not sending pressure at all in certain points where you should be. And, those types of things all kind of take a toll. And this is the type of game where like someone kind of has to answer for it. Like, you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. That is the definition of insanity. And it feels like when you just go and say, all right, well, we just lost, 55,000-0 to the Chiefs. And now we just lost $1 billion to nothing to the Texans. And you're still not making changes. It's kind of just like you question the complacency levels and like, are they just okay with, having, being all buddy, but not having, the results on the field. And at this point, even it feels like guys are not happy in that locker room. Maybe it's not even buddy anymore, but like, it feels like to me, if you don't make a change and you just keep trying to run this team back out there, and yeah, you might get a couple players back next week. Yeah, you might win a couple of games that you're not supposed to, and you might shock the world in that regard. But we're talking about a team that people are begging just to get to 2-4 by the bye week, which is such a shift from what we were talking about, where it's not even just anymore, hey, you played the Chiefs and the Bills and the Lions. Those are all uber competitive teams. And, you chalk up loss to the Texans. Yeah, they're a division winner from last year, but they play in the AFC South and their offense doesn't have a lot of playmakers on it. And you still just let them walk all over you in your home stadium, run up and down that field. And I mean, they should all be embarrassed. And I'm sure they'll be the first to tell you that they're embarrassed. And, I don't think that Zach Orr is like a problem in the locker room. I don't think he's like rubbing players the wrong way or like, being all like toxic or anything. But, sometimes you have to make hard decisions. And sometimes the Ravens, they choose not to make those hard decisions and kind of stay loyal, which again, in general is a good quality to have as an organization. But sometimes it can extend windows of guys that aren't actively helping the organization anymore.
Yeah, I think the locker room is one where I don't know if it's lost when it comes to Zach Orr, but it is borderline having, oh man, just some issues. And what I mean by that is clearly the defense is it's just not functioning. But I don't think it's a scenario where it's, oh, Zach, you just, you're inept, you're not doing, no, they're putting in some really good, I shouldn't say really good. They're putting in some competent defensive fronts, schemes, schematics, personnel packages. It's just the execution of it, plus the fact that the maybe strategy of when to use it is not there.
Yeah, and that's what everybody's saying. And I feel bad because I think, Zach Orr is a great guy. His story is phenomenal. Playing for the Ravens, that injury sets him back. They bring him in as the players coach, comes in, builds his way up from position to being the DC. That is a great story, and I was very much rooting for him. But the proof is in the pudding right now with this defense is Kevin mentioned, historically through the first 5 games, the worst defense in franchise history. We talked about what John Harbaugh would potentially do as far as firing Zach Arora. We assume it's going to happen, but based on the conversation during his time at the podium after the game, he made it very clear, hey, we're going to stick together. We're not going to get rid of Zach Arora. At what point does Steve Bisciotti need to step in? And I feel like we've talked about this at certain points throughout, John Harbaugh's tenure where, John's not really willing to push away an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator or a staff member or what have you. And we feel like Steve Bisciotti is the one that has to step in. Though no official word has been made about Steve Bisciotti doing that, this may be a time where the owner needs to step up, do his best Jerry Jones impersonation, come in and make that change. Kevin, do you see Steve Bisciotti being the guy to come in and do it? We don't really hear from Steve Bisciotti a lot, and that's a good quality to have in an owner. But at this point, maybe we're looking to the top guy to make that change.
I mean, he's made it very clear his priority is winning. I don't know. I mean, again, like he's very friendly with John Harbaugh, very friendly with Eric DeCosta. It feels like they're all kind of on the same page and same wavelength, but you do have to make tough decisions. And, like I get it, and everybody talks about how John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta are neighbors. Like there's all this conversation about like, is Eric DeCosta actually going to fire his neighbor? Like all that. But like at some point you do have to just kind of look at it. And again, it's not a during the season thing for Harbaugh. That's just not who this organization is. But I do like 100% believe that if the Ravens do not make the playoffs, they get ousted in disappointing fashion in the playoffs. It has to be the end of the line for John Harbaugh. And that call probably does come from Steve Bisciotti, if I'm being honest. So I think that John Harbaugh feels the pressure. You can certainly tell with his answers to the media and, how he's kind of felt on edge. It points this season, even kind of denying that it's Super Bowl or bust for this team, which everybody knows is just not true in the first place. So, I mean, we know that Steve Bisciotti, like he's someone that wants to prioritize winning. He's someone that wants to win now. He made that very clear during that availability with John Harbaugh. So, I mean, at what point do you just kind of say, hey, Lamar's 29, all these guys are getting older, like you still have time, why not make the most of it? I think that in terms of Zach Orr, I'm not sure Bisciotti would make that decision, but I think if it's for Harbaugh after the year, that's a different conversation.
I don't know if Steve Bisciotti would even look at it in that regards because of his past record of wanting to be hands off and allowing his people to make the hard decisions. At the same time, I know that those people do answer to him, and those answers to his hard questions better be good. I know that when he, had to quote unquote move on from Joe Flacco, like he was like, all right, bet, he had the hard, tough questions. So it's not like he's some absent-minded, person. He's highly intelligent when it comes to listening to those men that are in place to, give him the lowdown of why the team is performing the way it's performing. So, we shall see as far as he is concerned, but very interesting, bigger picture wise, what I feel is going on within this Ravens organization and how the front office is going to handle it.
Agreed. It's going to be quite the Monday. A lot of Ravens fans are going to be on their phones waiting for some news to drop about something. I'll be on my phone as well doing something similar, but it is going to be very interesting to see where this team goes from here because, man, the 1-4 start is bad. The 1-5 start will be worse, and I don't see if they can't beat the Texans. The Rams are a different beast, and we shall see what this team does. Don't want to knock them out of the woods yet because, there are guys out there who play football just as well, but that Rams team is no joke, and the Texans team stomped all over them at home. It was, if you watch the camera, look at the stands, the seats were empty. And Steve Bisciotti, more than anything, is a businessman, and he knows those are dollars that are getting not entering his pockets, and that's not a bad thing. That's not a good thing at all. Again, appreciate everybody for joining us for this post-game show. Again, we will be back here on Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time talking about the Ravens versus Rams. Second straight game at home. Hopefully a different outcome for the Ravens. Lots and lots to talk about as Most likely Lamar Jackson won't play, but regardless, we'll be talking about Ravens football here again. Thank you guys so much for joining us. For myself, KOQ, appreciate you guys for joining us here at the Raven Squad Show, and we will see you on Wednesday.